We are going to cover the completion stage of an external audit in this video. The aim is to outline the components of this important stage so you have an understanding of the work required. The audit process so far has seen the following completed. The acceptance stage, where the auditor considered whether they should accept the audit engagement. The engagement letter, where the client and auditor agreed the terms of the audit assignment. The planning stage, where any audit risks were identified and a strategy formed, documenting a plan needed to complete the audit properly. The assessment of control systems, where the auditor identified any control deficiencies and tested controls for their reliability. And the substantive testing stage, where the auditor completed audit procedures to identify any material misstatements within the financial statements. The completion and review stage is where most of the audit work has been completed, and it is now time to review what has been done and finalise any outstanding issues the auditor may have. There are several specific pieces of work that must be completed at this stage. Each one is of importance to the auditor. These include the overall review, the evaluation of misstatements, subsequent event review, going concern review, and obtaining written representations. The overall review is where the auditor will review the financial statements and the audit file. Here, the auditor should ensure that both the financial statements and the audit file are complete and consistent with one another. The financial statements should be reviewed at the end stage to ensure an appropriate financial reporting framework has been followed, any relevant laws and regulations have also been followed, the information within the financial statements is consistent with other published information, for example the director's report, and whether the audit team has addressed the important issues within the balances and transactions. Analytical procedures are used at the completion stage to ensure the financial statements have been reviewed thoroughly. These procedures must be carried out by the auditor, and it is one last attempt to ensure sufficient appropriate evidence has been collected on any changes or unusual events included within the accounts. The audit file is reviewed at this final stage to ensure the evidence collected is sufficient and appropriate. At the completion stage, they must ensure the evidence will support the audit opinion that will be formed. The documentation within the audit file will be reviewed to identify whether the audit was planned properly, whether auditing standards have been followed, has sufficient appropriate evidence been gathered, and if conclusions made are appropriate. This work is usually carried out by the audit manager, reviewing the work of the audit team. A disclosure checklist may also be used in many audit firms as a prompt to ensure the audit team has considered all that is necessary and that there is evidence collected in the audit file. In addition to reviewing the audit file and financial statements, the auditor must also review the misstatements that were collated during the audit process. At the planning stage, the auditor decides what is going to be a material misstatement, for example, 6% of profit. Material misstatements must be detected by the auditor so they can highlight to the client for amendment. All misstatements detected are usually recorded on a spreadsheet during the course of the audit. At the completion stage, the auditor should evaluate these misstatements to see if there is a material misstatement that should be amended in the financial statements. Remember, this could be an accumulation of many small errors within a balance that add up to a material misstatement. All misstatements identified, with the exception of very small ones, are discussed with the client for amendment. If any are not amended by the client, the auditor must assess whether the remaining errors are material to the users. This should be reviewed individually and in aggregate. The auditors should then explain the impact, if any, on the audit report and obtain written representations to confirm the uncorrected errors are immaterial. As well as the overall review and the evaluation of misstatements, the auditor has some specific audit procedures to carry out at the completion stage. Subsequent event review is one of these areas to cover. This is where the auditor reviews events that have occurred or come to light since the year end. They must consider whether there should be amendments made to the financial statements. This process reviews whether the accounting standard IAS 10 has been followed correctly by the entity. The standard states that material events after the reporting period should be included in the current period's financial statements. Audit procedures to identify events must be carried out in the period up to when the audit report is signed by the auditor. The going concern review is another process the auditor must follow at the completion stage. Audit procedures must be carried out to assess whether the going concern status of the entity is disclosed correctly within the financial statements. If the auditor disagrees with the going concern disclosure or lack of it within the financial statements, discussions must be made with the client to recommend amendment. Written representations are written confirmation of matters from the directors of the entity to the auditors. Certain matters must be confirmed in writing by the management to ensure the auditor has sufficient appropriate evidence on the financial statements overall. If the management will not provide written representations, again, discussions must be made with the directors. Without written representations, there will be a lack of sufficient appropriate evidence, which would have an impact on the audit opinion. Subsequent event review, going concern review, and written representations are all carried out at the completion stage, as this is the final stage of the audit process. This enables the auditor to review the year being audited, plus events that have occurred since, to ensure there are no omissions from the financial statements and disclosures are in accordance with accounting standards. We cover these three processes in separate videos due to the detail needed in understanding them fully. All 5 areas have been covered from the completion and review stage of an external audit. Once complete, in simple terms, the audit is complete and no other evidence would be obtained. The next step, based on the financial statements and evidence collected, is to form the independent opinion on them and prepare the audit report. I hope you found this video useful. Thank you for watching.